Hi, my name is Tomas Guevara, and this is the channel Rewriting the Reality. Last week, in my podcast number 174, I asked you if you knew what consciousness is. I also transcribed a part of the podcast from Stephen Strogat's interviewing Anil Seth in The Joy of Why. Today, in episode 175, I am not going to transcribe the second part of this podcast because it doesn't make sense. Instead, I am going to refer to the false beliefs Anil Seth held about what consciousness is and how our mind directs our body, including our brain. Subscribe to this channel, and you will start to remember everything. Misconceptions about consciousness. Stephen and Anil believe that consciousness resides or arises from the brain. Many people remember what happened to them during surgery, but according to Anil Seth, you lose consciousness when you are under general anesthesia. Here are 5 well-known cases of out-of-the-body occurrences during surgery. Out-of-body experiences, OBEs. 1. Pam Reynolds case, 1991. Pam Reynolds, an American singer, underwent a unique surgical procedure for a brain aneurysm called standstill surgery. Her body temperature was lowered to induce hypothermia, and her heart and brain activity were stopped. During this time, she reported a detailed OBE where she observed the surgery from above, including specific details like the tools used by the medical team. Her case gained significant attention and was featured in the book The Immortal Mind by Ervin Laszlo. 2. Maria's case, 2008. A 32-year-old woman, referred to as Maria in a study published in the journal Resuscitation, reported an OBE during cardiac arrest. She described leaving her body, observing medical personnel working on her, and accurately recounting events that occurred while she was supposed to be unconscious. The study's authors suggested that her experience might have been related to the physiological and psychological effects of cardiac arrest. 3. Surgical OBE Study, 2014. A study published in the journal Frontiers in Human Neuroscience explored OBEs during surgery under general anesthesia. The study included interviews with 55 patients, 7 of whom reported OBE-like experiences. While this study provided some insight into the phenomenon, more research is needed to understand its occurrence and significance. My comment: that is what they always say when they don't understand something. 4. Case in The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat by Oliver Sacks. In this book, author Oliver Sacks described a case of a patient who experienced an OBE during a surgical procedure under local anesthesia. Though not a general anesthesia case, it highlights the broader spectrum of OBE-related experiences. 5. Hemispherectomy OBE case, 2006. A study published in the journal Epilepsy and Behavior reported an OBE in a young girl who underwent a hemispherectomy, a surgical procedure where one hemisphere of the brain is removed, for the treatment of epilepsy. The girl described floating near the ceiling and observing her body during the operation. Scientific community's response. For the science community, these cases are often considered anecdotal and may not represent a widespread occurrence. While some individuals report OBEs during medical procedures, many others do not recall such experiences. Additionally, the scientific community continues to explore the possible explanations for these phenomena, including the effects of anesthesia, brain activity, and individual psychological factors. Insights from The Immortal Mind by Ervin Laszlo. We are entering into a new paradigm of understanding consciousness and its relationship with the brain and beyond. In The Immortal Mind, Laszlo and Peake provide a concise and lucid overview of the data for consciousness beyond the brain. Exploring a revolutionary new mechanism of consciousness-brain interactions using the principles of modern science such as quantum physics and string theory, this book is a welcome addition to the current paradigm shift of consciousness and a great asset for any student of the subject. Manjur Samanthalatan, M.D. Ervin Laszlo with Anthony Peake takes serious steps toward answering this grand question: does a part of our consciousness carry on after death, and, if so, what evidence is there to support this contention? If taken seriously, the proof uncovered by the authors will hopefully shake a few foundations and lead us onto the correct path once and for all, so that, as individuals, we might have some insight into what happens once the final curtain on this life comes down. New Dawn, Bruce Stringer. Biography. Ervin Laszlo is a systems scientist, integral theorist, and classical pianist. Twice nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, he is the founder and president of the international think tank the Club of Budapest as well as the Ervin Laszlo Center for Advanced Study. He lives in Tuscany. Anthony Peake is a writer, researcher, and author of 7 books, including Making Sense of Near-Death Experiences, which received a highly commended award from the British Medical Association. He lives in Crawley, West Sussex, UK. My perspective. As far as I know, there are many serious people studying what consciousness is. The problem is that most of them want to involve the brain in the process. I explained that the brain is only an organ to analyze what our senses input into it. No more. We don't use the brain to think. Analyzing is not necessarily the thinking of the mind but the brain. The mind, that is you, is always thinking. The mind doesn't analyze anything because the mind knows everything. The problem is the intervention of the brain in trying to analyze what our senses input into it. How to avoid the intervention of the brain? There are 2 methods. One is meditation, in which we can slow the analysis of the brain. If you try to lower your heartbeat, at the same time you reduce the brain's analyses. The other method is under deep hypnosis. Both these methods have never been tested because nobody thought that it could be done. I hope that someone will try it soon. If they need my help, I will be ready. I offer myself as a guinea pig if necessary, or I can write the protocol to do it right. There are also many books about what we call near-death experiences, NDEs. I explained that NDEs are only dramas set up by our subjective self. The purpose of the dramas is to trigger a change in the person. You will never find a case of NDE in which the person does not experience a 180-degree change. That proves that this method functions very well, and that the subjective self, also known as the inner self, did a good job. Anil Seth mentioned in the podcast the concept of controlled hallucinations. The idea behind controlled hallucination is that our experiences of the world and indeed of the self, they're not direct readouts of what's actually there, even though it may seem that way in our experience. You open your eyes in the morning, and there's just a world. And it seems as though the world is just pouring itself into your mind through the transparent windows of your eyes and your other senses. He continues, but this is not what is going on. And of course, this has been recognized, certainly in philosophy, since Plato, and then Kant and then science forever as well. It seems that he is contradicting himself. Anyway, now let me explain what happens when you wake up, in the morning, the afternoon, or at night. You open your eyes and see our physical reality. What you don't understand yet is that what you are seeing is what your perception's mechanism created before. Remember, perceiving is creating. It is not that the world is just pouring itself into your mind, but the reverse. Your mind is pouring the world into your senses, and then the senses give this information to our brain. The problem is that the science community believes that the brain is the mind or that the mind resides in the brain, and that is completely incorrect. Another piece of evidence that I can offer is the fact that you can lose a part of your brain and continue working as if nothing happened. This occurs because the mind permeates the brain and all the organs of our body, including our atoms. Anil Seth also mentioned a theory called predictive processing or predictive coding. The idea is quite simple. It's that the brain is always generating predictions about the way the world is or the way the body is. And it uses sensory signals to just calibrate these predictions to keep them tied to the world, in ways that are not necessarily titrated by accuracy, but by their utility for the organism. So, we see the world not as it is, but as we are. He continues, But there's a really provocative flip here, which is to realize, or at least this is the hypothesis, that what we perceive is not just sort of modulated by the brain's expectations, but it's built from them. So that the world we experience really does come from the inside out, rather than from the outside in. And the sensory signals, they're just reporting what we call prediction errors, the difference between what the brain is expecting and what it's getting at every level of processing. End of the transcription. Here is another mistake. We don't see the world as we are, but what our beliefs tell us we have created. To make matter, we use energy, links of consciousness, then we slow the time element, and this is how we create all our constructions, in association with our collective consciousness. But each one of us colors our reality or influences its creation with our personal beliefs. That is why everyone's reality is slightly different. And in some cases, it is more different. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel.